How are you this morning? Are you ready to rock and roll? Okay, now I want to kind of get a sense of who my audience is. How many of you are either pastors or on parish staffs? How many of you are very engaged parishioners? Okay, we have some overlap there. That's what I was hoping. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be able to share with you some of the findings of the Emerging Models Project. Really, the Emerging Models Project was a profound experience. We spent 6 years going across the country, and we were tasked by the Lilly Endowment to go out and find excellence in parish ministry. Now, by definition, we didn't interview everybody, and I'm not telling you that what I'm going to tell you is true of every single parish, but we went out and we literally mined what was going on in really good parishes, and we met folks like you all over the country. And so that's what I'm bringing you today. First of all, I'm bringing you the findings. We hosted 8 leadership research gatherings across the country. We met with people from more than 80% of our diocese. So this is really pretty representative. We brought them in and we mined their wisdom. And we had them write answers to about 26 different questions. We listened to them in conversation. And several things began to happen. Over time, if you've got the same pool of people answering questions in 8 gatherings, you begin hearing the same things over and over again. And what we began to realize is that there are certain things that just kept rising to the top like cream to the top of milk, you know? That they were just wonderful, and we decided that these were the benchmarks of excellent parishes. We're not calling them best practices, because there's lots of kinds of practices, and some work in some places and are not good in others, but they really are benchmarks because we heard them over and over again. The book, The Changing Face of Church, has all 12 benchmarks in it. I'm bringing some of them to you today. So that's one thing. We decided to focus today on lay ministry and discipleship of parishioners. So there's a lot of peripheral things I'm not going to talk about, but they are in the book. Secondly, we learned that there's lots of ways you can talk about parish, but if you began listening with a theological ear and using theological language, then you really began to understand what people were talking about, because this is our jargon. This is the way we talk. This is the way we've been trained to think. And so when we began to layer theology over the findings, just all kinds of things began to emerge. So I'm going to share with you some benchmarks. I'm going to share with you the words of the pastoral leaders themselves, and I do want to tell you most of these quotes are in the book, so those of you that take copious notes, you know, don't wear out your hand. You just look in the book and you'll find them. And then my attempt to find some theology and some new images to ground what we're doing. So what we're about today, this morning in our time together, we have about an hour and a half, so we're not rushed. This is good time. Is we're going to tell stories, lots of stories. But what I want you to do, because you're not going to get to just sit there, you have to work while you're here. I want you to run the stories of your parish through your head as I make these points. I want you to picture your own stories, because the point of a benchmark isn't to tell you what to do. It's to give you some new way to look inside of your parish experience. And so I'm going to start with, I asked 3 of my online students, well, I asked several of them, I picked 3, to just tell me about their parish. So these are 3 of the responses I got, and they're representative of the new and changing parish story out there, because what we found out is the story is changing. The story that we're telling ourselves about parish and about parishioners and about discipleship and about lay ministry, about pastoring, these are changing. All right, parish number 1 is a large suburban parish with over 28,000 registered members. It has a school of 800 students. Only 7,000 to 8,000 are regularly active in worship attendance. There's a core group of 500 members that attend Mass daily and are intimately involved in the church. There are 2 full-time resident priests and 2 permanent deacons. The head diocesan pastor has been assigned to the parish for the last 3 years and is in his early 60s, and coincidentally was asked to really come in and work with finances in this very large parish. The parochial vicar is a Peruvian priest in his late 30s, barely into a year of his 3-year commitment. And this parish actually has a pretty large staff, I think 15 to 20 full-time staff, not counting the school. The congregation is about 3/4 Caucasian and about 1/5 lower income Hispanic membership, along with a tight Asian and Filipino contingent and a less numerous African American group. There are 2 morning masses 6 days a week and 8 services on Sunday, 3 in Spanish. Weekly collections average $50,000. I thought you'd get a kick out of that. Okay, parish number 2 is a city parish which serves over 8,000 parishioners, although there are over 4,000 families registered. So usually we multiply by, let's say, 3, so that's about 12,000. There are 200 students enrolled in the school and over 1,000 parishioners attending faith formation classes in RCIA. The parish has grown into a very multicultural faith community with 80% of its members Hispanic and the remaining 20% from other cultural backgrounds. You do know there's a very rapidly growing Hispanic presence throughout the country in our parishes. This is not going to be uncommon. There are 10 Sunday liturgies celebrated on the weekends, 6 in Spanish and 4 in English. 2 daily masses are celebrated Monday through Saturday, 1 in English and the other in Spanish. Many, including the older English-speaking members, and especially the majority of the Spanish-speaking members, have had to endure much suffering and disappointment. Both are working-class people who may not have much money, but have great faith in God and a huge love for the church. The parish is served by 2 priests and 2 deacons. The full-time parish staff is composed of 8 highly dedicated individuals. I believe there was a parenthesis here that said, and overworked. The area in which the parish is located is a middle to low income area. The majority of parishioners are relatively young and mostly immigrants from Mexico and Central America. Many of them are here illegally, having left their country in hopes of finding a place where they could feed their families. Okay, my 3rd parish. This parish is in the north, not northeast, middle of the country. In 2001, 4 parishes and their 2 parochial schools were merged into our present parish. All 4 parishes were located in the rolling hills of a rural area. 2 were located in very small villages, and the other 2 were in the country. All 4 communities were originally settled by Irish and German settlers. Not long after the merger took place, we began plans to build a new complex. Presently, we have approximately 1,900 parishioners from 870 households and a parish school with 119 students. The merger was very difficult for our parishioners. Despite work by the parish council, the long-range planning committee, and a fundraising team, despite that, we lost many parishioners. The impracticality of maintaining 4 churches, 2 schools, and 3 halls was a hard sell. It is amazing how attached everyone was to the buildings and grounds. But you don't know about that in Boston, right? I understand the parishioners and generations of their parents provided blood, sweat, and tears erecting and maintaining the buildings, but they were too small to host our members and very costly. Even eventually a new complex in a central location was built. It's beautiful and has parts of all 4 churches woven into it: stained glass altars, baptismal fonts, statues, and a memorabilia case. And then some parts of all 4 parishes were sent to a sister parish in Haiti that we're very grateful for them. And most of the parishioners that left have come back. Okay, now at the far other end of the spectrum, and it was not one of my parishioners, but in the past, I will share a story of another student that I had. There are parishes in this country that have neither resident pastor nor resident staff. And so the parishioners themselves run the parish. This particular parish is in Oregon. It's a boat community, so most of the parishioners actually live on their boats. They were fishermen. The community is aging. They can't fish anymore. The fishing industry has gone down. But there they are in their boats in much need of pastoral care. So the parishioners they divvy it up. You do this and you do that, and then a priest comes in on Sunday and provides sacramental ministry. So we have a whole range of spectrums. So start getting the story of your parish in your head as we go along here. Because you see, the story is changing. Now, let's do a little context here. In the country today, according to the studies, there are 65.2 million Catholics. That increased 1 million over the last year. About 60% are under the age of 50. Did you know we're a young church? Does it look like that in your masses on Sunday? My aunt and uncle went down to Florida in their 80s, struggling desperately to figure out what I did, and they went up, they came back and said, we found the new model of church. And I said, well, what did you find? And they said, well, we sat up in the balcony, we looked down, and there were all gray heads down there. Some truth to that. Currently, half of Catholics under the age of 30 are Hispanic. So we have a growing, virtually every diocese in this country has a rapidly growing Hispanic community. This is true everywhere. There's also a rapidly growing Asian Catholic community in this country, and I think we're going to see a lot of growth in that community in the very near future. Okay, 18,280 parishes according to the Kennedy Directory, the latest ones. That's down 400 in the past year due to closing, merging, and so forth. Roughly 31,000 lay ecclesial ministers, which we're going to talk about this morning. Unfortunately, Kennedy Directory has not figured out that they're supposed to count this group of people who are in essence keeping our parishes going. And somehow, I have all these little things I'm going to take on, and that's probably going to be one of them. 16,380 permanent deacons, and this group is one of the most rapidly growing ministry groups in the country. And we'll talk more about them in just a minute. 40,666 priests. That includes religious and diocesan. Of that, there's about 27,000 diocesan priests. Of those, about 17,000 are actively involved in parish ministry. I want you to think about this for a minute. By and large, though religious are involved in parish ministry, they're pretty much pulling out of having their own parishes. They do provide often weekend sacramental ministry. So by and large, the parishes in this country are being pastored by these 17,000 men. Now, if you stop to think about it, they're not evenly spread across the country. So there are 3/4 of our dioceses have more parishes than they have pastors, than they have men available to pastor them. The East Coast is most likely to have more priests than parishes, but the density of the Catholic population here still makes the ratio about the same. North Dakota is the diocese struggling the most. In Fargo, I think there's about 80 parishes that they can't provide a pastor for. We do know that nearly half of the parishes in this country share their pastor with at least one other parish or mission. A new thing called multiple parish pastoring. And one more little statistics here to set the table. Half of the men in active parish ministry, actually half of the priests in this country, expect to be retired within the next 8 years. The first waves of retirement, I'm told, are going to really hit us in 2012 and 2013. I know in Dallas, they've got 3 huge parishes coming open this year due to 2 retirements, and then they have a new auxiliary bishop, so that's pulled a pastor. They don't know how they're going to pastor those parishes. Okay, so that's the picture. Now, what we're facing is a massive paradigm shift in this country, in the story that we tell ourselves about parish. I've already given you some of the changes. We cannot anymore think of that. Some of you are old enough to remember the bells of St. Mary's Parish. And so what we're needing to do is find a new story, the new story that we're being led to by Spirit to talk about parish life in this country. And I'm going to put this in context of the words, I think it was interesting that we both pulled on Thomas Merton. If our prayer is the expression of a deep and grace-inspired desire for newness of life, and not the mere blind attachment to what has always been familiar and safe. God will act in us, and through us renew the church by preparing in prayer what we cannot yet imagine or understand. I came away from my time working with this project absolutely more filled with hope than when I began it. But it's going to require us to change the story. Not lose what's important to us, but look at how we're telling the story. My own theology parish and my ecclesiology changed drastically. And I began to realize that when I went into this project, my understanding of parish was very personnel driven. It was the pastor and the parishioners. And when you talk to somebody about the parish, what do you talk about? The pastor. Does it have a good pastor? Does it have a bad pastor? Does the pastor do this? Does the pastor do that? That's personnel driven. I came out of the project with a very mission driven understanding of parish. And I have to tell you, it's because you all taught it to me. If we start with the personnel, we don't tell the story of parish. Now, I found that I had a very intriguing model of parish as I started this. Well, first I'll tell you, we did find changing parish structures. This is the story I'm going to tell. Creative uses of traditional parish practices. We know how to do this stuff. We didn't unearth anything that if you turn to page 19 in that Changing Facebook, you're going to find the answer. We know how to do this stuff. We've just got to get creative about how we're doing it. And then these evolving models. This is from one pastor. The sky is the limit. The old paradigms are going away, so we must look for new ways. I think and pray often about the Acts of the Apostles. We are building a new church. The old way is passing away. There is a new church coming. So what are the pastors telling us? Okay, now I want you to kind of think what you think the future of your parish is going to be. Parish in general, or your parish in particular. In the document, Co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord, the bishops of this country offered us an invitation that's really important. They asked us if we could imagine a future that is faithful to the church's theological and doctrinal tradition and responsive to contemporary pastoral needs and situations, shaped through the workings of the Holy Spirit. This is the challenge that we're being given in this country. I don't doubt everyone's being given to it, but let's narrow our talk today to the United States. This is the challenge that we're being given, to be faithful. And we are faithful. We found this everywhere. But how do we do it in today's church? Now, I want you to get in your mind, if you had to put a picture up here or an image of what parish is, what would you choose? And since I'm in the PowerPoint business here, I had to come up with an idea for that. So that, I realized, was my image of parish. Now, we're moving out of a worldview in general that was very dualistic and mechanistic. There were the parts, they were separate from each other. You can describe something by its parts. So I realized that my image of parish had two parts. It had a pastor and it had parishioners. As if parishioners were one body, and the pastor was separate, and that described a parish. And then I realized, well, it might be the sanctuary and then the nave of the church, so that when I thought about parish, but it was very divided, this image that I had. And I began to realize it wasn't working anymore, because when you talk about the parishioners as the parishioners, as if they're a single body, how do you understand the numbers? And every one of you involved in parish knows every parishioner has a story. Every parishioner has an intense story. And this sort of static, dualistic understanding of parish doesn't work with the one that you know. And then what I began to realize is how much we've concretized the traditional images. So if this represents the body of Christ, it looks more like a torso and a head, head. This kind of a head. Well, there's lots of other images of body than a torso and a head, but we've sort of concretized that way. Then another favorite one is the flock, the shepherd and the flock. I know it's might be kind of nice to shepherd, but I don't know anybody that really likes being a sheep. You see, what we've done with our images is we've concretized them. It doesn't matter what sheep worries about anything. It doesn't matter that sheep A has a different set of problems than sheep B. We're just kind of the sheep. And when we concretize images, we lose their storytelling power. And the storytelling power of the gospel of the shepherd and the sheep was not about the sheep, folks. It was about the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. Because if it was just about the flock, the story about going out and finding the 100th black sheep and bringing it back into the fold with 99 was just to make them like all the others. And I struggled with that image for a long time. And then wait a minute, that's not what it's about at all. It's about relationship. So how, I asked myself, could I find an image that spoke to me of what I was learning from you and witnessing across the country about how you understand parish? And I ended up finding stuff in the field of social networking. We have an operative theology of parish that is Eucharistic centered, that shows that the parish is co-responsible for the mission. And I'm going to get to my new image in a second. This is our understanding of parish. Today's talk is not going to talk a lot about the whole idea of being Eucharistic centered, but that is it, folks. We are a sacramental people. And there is not a conversation I had anywhere in this country or any parts of the project. Somebody didn't bring the whole thing to a halt and said, if we don't talk about the Eucharist, then what is the point of being here? That is core to what we do. We are a Eucharistic people. And so when we come up with these models and the images, they have to reflect that. They have to reflect that individual personal relationship to Jesus that the parish is really about. And because we're theologically reflective people, and if we get caught up in the numbers, if we get caught up in the day-to-day, is the meeting room set up, and does the right person have the keys, and are the finances in order, we lose this. We lose this. We are a Eucharistic-centered people, and we are co-responsible. Now, the new story then is very dynamic because the Eucharist is dynamic. The Paschal Mystery is dynamic, right? This is my new image of parish. Is that your image of parish? Let me explain what this is. If you Google social network, you can find tons of images that look similar to this. And what this is every dot up there represents a different person. This was created by a man named James Fowler, and believe it or not, there's 2,200 people represented in that picture, the size of an average parish. And what they did is, imagine taking your address book and putting a dot down for every person in your address book. And then for every person that you have a dot for there, going in their address book and put down a dot for every person in their address book, and so on until you exhaust the group. Now, some people are going to have repeats in their address books, so that person doesn't get a new dot. Their dot gets made a little bit bigger. And this is what you end up with. And so you see that there is a cluster, and there are smaller clusters within the cluster there. And so when we think of the parish community, we need to think of the individuals who are clustered into smaller communities, right? Now, what is the gift about social networking is they not only show you count, they show you relationships. And what we're finding in parishes is we need to look at how people are related. Now, it's easiest to talk about the ones on the edges. See the ones that are just barely hanging on there? Which Catholics are those? Say it out loud. You got it. The Christmas and Easter Catholics. The C and E Catholics. They're just barely attached. It might be our homebound who are just barely attached.
New Catholics.
It could be new Catholics, yes. I know of a parish that sends the parish council agenda to all of their homebound parishioners and asks them to pray for the council each month, right? A way of connecting. So what we're looking at here is connections. If you take any dots off of this picture, any of them, you have changed the picture, right? You've absolutely changed the picture. Every person counts. Nobody's a throwaway. And it's very easy in the old models not to think about everybody, but when you move to a model like this, it calls to mind and you begin to see which groups are less connected, which groups are more connected. Who needs to move around? If one of these smaller clusters in there, let's say, is your Catholic school, and I understand from pastors that often that brings a lot of life and energy to the parish, and it's a good thing. And then my question is, what happens after graduation? Where did those students and parents go? Now, there's three choices. They move into another cluster, they move out to the edge, or what? They drop off. And if they drop off, this picture has changed. Your parish is different. And so one of the benchmarks of the project is absolutely intentional outreach to every member of the parish. Now, people do it different ways over a cycle of years. They set up the parish into neighborhoods. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. But is your story of parish inclusive of everybody? Now, here's another one, and I think it shows the individual clusters a little more clearly. This would be sort of the idea of a central cluster with surrounding clusters. This could be the image of all kinds of things. It could be the image of clustered parishes. And so if you are in a clustered parish situation, what is the relationship? You know, if somebody were to have the energy to take the dime and draw one of these network maps, what are the relationships? This might be a central worship site, and then outlying pastoral service centers. What else could you see in here if this was clustered parishes? It could be a central administrative site where you bring all of the staff to a central site that serve the cluster. And then you begin to get a picture, and you see that one on the lower right isn't very connected. And you go, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why are we not connecting with this parish? Why, or this group of folks? This also could be a map of a mega parish, where the center might be the parish council and the staff. A lot of parishes set up things like ministry or things like commissions, and pastoral council members then are liaisons to the different commissions or ministries. All right, so what we need to look at is how are we connected? And are we ignoring people, and who is not getting the energy that is needed? So these are just playing with images. Play with new images for your idea of parish. Okay, now, theological language for all of this. This is very Trinitarian. You know, if in the old mechanistic model of Trinity is the hard triangle with the 3 points. And we all know that's not the spirit. And we are reclaiming a very Trinitarian theology, I think, and particularly when we talk about parish. The Trinity is relational, it's dynamic, it's pulsing, it's alive. That's what parishes are. Constantly changing, constantly interacting, constantly interdependent. You need every part of the Trinity. You miss a part of the Trinity, you don't have a Trinity anymore. You need every part of the parish. This is people's model of parish. It's the common matrix, it's the Christa Fideli. We are such Christ-faithful people. The community and the whole church has received a mission from Christ, a diversity of active service. Now this is where we're going to move into discipleship. Because in that model, everyone's responsible for their spot in the model, right? According to canon law, the parish itself is the primary agent of pastoral care. That means all of us. All of us. This quote from a parish life coordinator, which in this diocese, I don't know if you have any, they're also called pastoral administrators. They're deacon religious or lay people that are assigned to a parish that does not have a pastor. All right, the parish will be a community of communities which gather together on Sunday mornings to celebrate Eucharist and go forth from the table to build the reign of God's justice and peace in the larger community of the city, state, country, and the world. The parish will understand that it does not exist for itself, but for the mission. Parish equals communion and mission. I think this most adequately summarizes all of the findings of the project. We are no longer talking about parishes as individual, but as we have this regional image of parishes anymore. We're talking about regional communities of communities in which everyone is responsible. That is absolutely centered on the Eucharist. You know, and how does that happen in our parish? How well are Eucharists done? How well does the language that's used reflect the language of the people? And I know this is a big issue that's coming up. Okay. Recognize that gentleman? In a speech last summer to his diocese, the Diocese of Rome, he said this: a co-responsible parish will require a change of mentality, especially regarding lay people, to move from considering them to be the clergy's collaborators, to recognize them as truly sharing responsibility for the existence and action of the church. What is a co-responsible parish? It is one in which all of the baptized, ordained and lay together, are responsible for one another. Folks, we don't get away with saying that's Father's job anymore. Well, why doesn't Father do that? He's the pastor. We are co-responsible. That's what our baptism does for us. Co-responsible. And this is an ongoing theme of his. This wasn't just a chance conversation. All right, this is from a diocesan person. There will be a wider understanding that to be a disciple is to continue the mission and ministry of Jesus. This will be new and central, an element of everything that a parish does. In order to be a co-responsible parish, we all have to take our discipleship seriously. Now, this is what people told us in the end a vibrant parish looks like. It will have vibrant and welcoming smaller faith-based communities. Back there in that social networking thing, those were all those different little groups. This might be the traditional Renew type scripture sharing group, but it also might be other kinds of groups in the parish. It might be the Booster Club and the Formation families and the senior group, all kinds of faith sharing groups. Increase lay leadership. This is the only way it's going to work. If we want to continue parish life as we know it, we have to have increased lay leadership, and that is both lay ecclesial minister as well as parishioner. Mission-focused and justice-oriented communities, inclusive of diverse peoples and forms of leadership in changing parish structures. The story is changing. Would you use those words to describe your parish? I'm amazed at the justice orientation that we encountered. It's like people in ministry have justice just woven into the very fabric of their beings. It was one of the, for me, pleasing findings of the project. Okay, this is from a pastoral leader. To be a total ministry community, and that's a phrase that we use in the project. It means the same thing as co-responsible. The staff, community, and pastor have to reach out to the community. Our pastor and pastoral assistants are very good at listening to the needs of the parish and, for lack of better words, actually caring. I thought that was interesting. We provide room for parishioners to take leadership roles and become active, but also try to reach those who are more introverted through spiritual endeavors, extra masses or services, faith groups, etc. We are very involved in social justice, reaching out to the poor, sick, imprisoned, and the outcast, and we try to minister to the minorities as best we can, despite the language barriers. But it's equally important to our parish to have fun and develop relationships. I'm pretty sure they haven't missed anything in that statement. But do you see all the parts? Do you see all those separate clusters that are an essential part of the parish? This is a parish that has this concept of being a total ministering community. Not everybody's going to do the social justice. Not everybody's going to run the food pantry, but somebody is. Not everybody's going to sit on the parish council, but somebody is, you see. And so collectively, the parish comes together. So this is one of the benchmarks, one of the 12 benchmarks that we are naming. The emergence of a total ministering community with a growing recognition and appreciation of the common call to discipleship, with different expressions among clergy, lay ecclesial ministers, lay professionals, and parish leaders working together in building the spiritual vitality of parish life. We did not find role confusion out there. There was no role confusion. There was no identity confusion. People understood what their roles were and how they serve the parish and how critically important it is that parishioners are involved in this conversation. And so, how are we redefining ourselves? Let's talk about the parish as a community of disciples. We talk about baptismal call, as I listen to your counterparts out there, that rolls off our tongue like butter. Baptismal call of the faithful, the baptismal call of the faithful. You get people to talk about what it is, what it looks like in practice, and that's a lot harder to do. A whole lot harder to do. But in practice, we're doing it. The community is called and sent, rooted in the Eucharist and co-responsible for the mission. Now, what does that called and sent mean? Well, the call comes from baptism, of course. And then within that parish family, people are catechized, they're taught their faith, and given pastoral care. That is the purpose of a parish, right? That's what we do for the community. But it doesn't stop there. It switches. We become catechizers, and we give one another pastoral care. That's what a disciple does. And so in these parishes, not only are we providing these things, we are empowering, calling forth the gifts of one another to do it for one another. And eventually in the new story, we're going to realize that if I need pastoral care, I might get it from my faith community as well as getting it at the rectory. Because that's who we are as called people. And then the sent part is we're not only sent to each other, we are sent to each other in the parish, we are sent out into the world. Now, this is where I actually agree with the bishops when they say the call of the lady is into the world. We need to take the good news out there. That's our job. And how do we do it? How do I do it in my job as a laborer? How do I do it in my job as a nurse? How do I do it in my job as a lawyer? How do I live out my faith there? And has my parish taught me how to do that? Does my parish support me in do that? One of the things that we found is we're a little bit navel-gazing. We're so caught up in what's happening on the campus, and I don't mean college campus, but the parish campus, that we don't spend a lot of time looking at what happens when we go out. One of my favorite stories is a man who worked for the city. He was a ditch digger, he was a laborer, hard labor. But at lunch, instead of sitting with his coworkers, he would bring his Bible. This was an older African-American gentleman, and he would go and sit off a ways and eat his lunch and read his Bible. And then as he explained to us, there were days when one or another of them would just come and sit with him and say, let me tell you what's going on in my life. And he would listen, and they would share faith, and he might read scripture to them. He didn't go out there and do the hard-hitting sell. He witnessed his faith day after day after day, and people found him. Where did he learn how to do that? Probably from his mama and from his church community. Right? When we do our time and talent stewardship things, how many of them include caring for an aged parent at home? How many of them include I'm really good at not cheating my customers, or not buying cheaper parts when I do a repair job, or on and on and on, right? That's what discipleship means. How do we live out our faith? It's the parish where we learn that, but it's also the parish where we learn how to do that. So that's the called and sent that we're working with here. And that's why we're co-responsible for the mission. And I think we get caught up so much in the stuff of parish that sometimes we forget about being rooted in the Eucharist. The bar for us is the Apostolic Church, right? Okay, now, thought you would be interested in parishes that rate themselves in the top 10% for pastoral excellence. This was a survey that was done by the National Pastoral Life Center for the project. And this was answered by pastors. Went out to over 1,000 pastors. Those pastors that rated themselves very highly as far as pastoral excellence all told us this stuff. There are more activities in ministry programs than in other parishes. They are more apt to plan and have mission statements, and they are growing and positive about their future. This showed up with enough regularity to be statistically verifiable. And I can't prove this statistically, but it was my observation that those people that we met that did strategic planning in their parishes and were working out of a strategic plan were happier, more relaxed, and less anxious than the people that didn't. Now, not being a planner by nature, this wasn't news to me, but they were. And so, creating that common vision, that common mission in the parish, so that every committee, every counselor, the staff, the pastor works out of that shared vision for this parish in this place, that's going to lead you to excellence. Now, this is what people told us. When they told us that their parishes are not vibrant and alive, they told us one or all of these things. The pastor, the staff, or the parishioners are the problem. Oh. But if you have a dysfunctional pastor, if you have a dysfunctional staff member, or their relationship isn't working, you just do your own thing, go off and be in your own silo, don't bother me if you get your work done, I'm really happy. That's not a good relationship. Or if the parishioners are just refusing, and we all know communities where this might happen, we have to take care of ourselves. If we are in this ministry, we have to take care of ourselves. Our personal, spiritual, emotional, psychological health impacts the spirituality of the parish. Say that really loudly. Every person in here has to do this. And you don't have to just do it for you. It matters in the parish. And in those parishes where the staff is not getting along with each other, or there's stuff going on inside, it doesn't stay inside. Believe me, it doesn't. Parish trauma is a slightly different category, and this could be all kinds of things. The parish has just found that it's going to merge, it's going to cluster, it's lost a beloved pastor, a child in the school has died in an accident. There could be all kinds of things. It's a trauma that impacts the entire community. Folks, you got to deal with it. You can't move on without dealing with it. And to be in ministry in the parishes in this country today, you have to be able to know how to move a community through grief. All across the board, we've got to be able to deal with this. We are a church in grief in this country in many ways. Because the old story is going away, the new story is in its place. And any kind of change involves some kind of grief, whether you welcome the change or not. So if you think about your communities and how do you work with them and move them through that. Lily wanted us to only look at pastors. And certainly you need a healthy, excellent pastor for a good community. But we said that's not true to the Catholic experience. And so what we did was we stepped back and said we're going to look at the parish as a system. Now go back to the system networking thing. We're going to look at the parish as a whole system. We are co-responsible if that's the truth. And so how do we look at the parish as a whole with all the baptized assuming responsibility for the community of disciples and so on? All right, so what happened when we laid this model on? We saw things differently. In parish leadership, this is what people are looking at: collaborative, team-oriented leadership. Leading and sharing ministry in clustered parishes and small faith communities. Increased dependency on the leadership of lay ecclesial ministers, deacons, and parishioners, and recognition that all ministry is rooted in discipleship. Now, what I want to say about leadership is, I'm not necessarily talking about the leader. Certainly the leader has to provide leadership. But we're using a more contemporary understanding of leadership, and this is basically the capacity or ability to move a community through change towards its mission or vision. And if you think about it, what do we talk about a community? It's about conversion, right? This is about conversion. Now, there are appointed leaders, and you know who they are, and there are unauthorized leaders in your parish, and I'll bet every one of you could tell me, who is the unauthorized leader in your parish? The secretary, the biggest donor, you know who that person is. Now here's my favorite story. I asked a group to share stories, and a music minister from the parish stood up and said, it's a 7th grader, a 7th grade boy in our parish, and everybody's like, and he said, no, he had, as music minister, he had an 8th grade choir. And he said, this 7th grade boy wanted in that choir so bad, and I kept saying, you can't be in it, it's an 8th grade choir. You're a 7th grader, wait, next year. Well, the kid didn't give up. The kid wanted to be in that choir so bad. He fussed at his parents, he fussed at the music minister, he started fussing at the pastor. The pastor said, do something, what are we gonna do? So the choir director got very creative as he explained it to us, and he renamed the choir. It was now the choir for 8th graders and those who are aspiring to the 8th grade. He accepted the young man into the choir. The young man was so excited and so enthused. He not only energized the choir, but you know what 8th graders do in the presence of a 7th grader? They're not going to be bettered. So they got better, their practices got better. It showed at the 7 a.m. Sunday Mass whenever they had them singing. When only the parents came, you know, only the parents who were the only ones that want to listen to the 8th grade choir. But the 8th grade, the parents were going, you should hear these kids. And more people came. And that young man's enthusiasm began to spread and infect in a good way the entire parish. All right, so without exactly being intent, the young man moved that parish closer to its mission. So when we're talking about leadership, we're looking at this sort of thing. Now, this is a pastor. At present, I am attempting to identify and establish a strong pastoral leadership team, as well as cultivate leaders in parish ministry from our membership. I'm also trying to develop and root, with the help of others, a clear vision for our parish. Okay, so you see all of those elements there. Now, this is what we discovered. Among the obvious qualities of a leader, being pastoral and ethical and prophetic, things that you would expect and are important, we found some others that are critical. Tolerance for complexity. This one is really important. Our parishes are incredibly complex entities. That's why the one category fits all just doesn't work. Whether it's culturally diverse, whether it's generationally diverse, whether there's gender diversity, whether there's ideology diversities, political diversities, never mind the kinds of accounting systems we have to put in place now, and all of the records we have to keep for sacraments and for irregular marriages, and on and on and on and on. And everybody that walks in the door doesn't think the same. And everybody that walks in the door has an idea of what they want out of that parish. And you have to be able to tolerate that kind of complexity to be a vibrant leader. And I've looked at this and looked at this as far as I can figure out, and maybe one of you can tell me something different on the break, I'll welcome it. The only way you develop this tolerance is to develop it. It takes experience. And I think that's why some of our newer ordained and our newer lay ministers and our newer deacons struggle a little bit, because it just takes time to develop this kind of tolerance. But we saw this in the folks that we worked with. Very adaptive and creative. The old models aren't working anymore. Adaptive means, you know, if it's I've got to do the finances right, fine, that's a technical fix. I go to the diocese, I find out what the rules are, I follow the rules, I'm fine. There's too much going on in parishes for which we have no guidebook. There is no guidebook for the way we're doing parish today. And the really adaptive leaders are those that get in there, they take the coat jacket off, they roll up their sleeves, and they say, I don't know any more than you do, but we love this parish and we're going to make it work. And then they get very creative about how that happens. There are as many ways to do parish as I think there are parishes. It's got to work for your place and your time and your folks. Canon law, the latitude in canon law is huge. It's absolutely huge. It's vast. And so we met leaders that are adaptive and creative. These are hallmarks, I think, of good leaders. And they have pastoral imagination. Now, I think this is really intriguing. Here's one way to think about what pastoral imagination is. They look at what others are looking at, but see what no one else has yet seen. They look at what others are looking at, but see what no one else has yet seen. It's imagination. An artist can look at a blank canvas and see something incredibly beautiful. A sculptor can look at a block of marble and see something incredibly beautiful. Henry Nouwen has that marvelous story about the young boy that goes into the sculptor's studio and he sees this block of marble. He goes away, comes back later, and where that was is a gorgeous marble lion. And he says to the sculptor, "How did you know the lion was in the marble?" And the sculptor said, "Because there was a lion in my heart." See, that kind of imagination. How are we thinking about our parishes using that kind of imagination? Okay, now let's talk about parishioners. What I discovered was when I changed my model from being personnel-driven to being mission-driven, I had to start with the mission when I talked about parishes. I used to talk about the pastors first, and then I'd talk about the staff, and then if there was time at the end, I talked about parishioners. And I realized that is not true to the way we are living parish life in this country. If we are not focused on the parishioners, there isn't any point in all of it. So we have to begin by talking about the parishioners. This is from a diocesan representative. Without collaboration and working together, the mission for the future will be overwhelming. No one person has the vision or energy to accomplish change for the future. The Spirit has gifted each of us, and unless we are open to each person's gifts, the future of the church will be hindered. Each person's gift. Everybody brings something. That 7th grade boy brought something. He had a gift. Where are the gifts in your parish? Where are the unexplored gifts in your parish? Where are those little clusters that haven't been tapped into yet in your parish? This is from another person, a lay minister. The perception that father or sister is in the church to do the ministries of service has already been dealt a blow. With some reluctance, the laity at large are stepping forward, but in the future, it will be impelling that the level of awareness and demand of gospel service be realized in the individual lives of the community. That's discipleship. And this is not happening because of numbers. This is happening because the Spirit is waking us up to what our baptism in our community means. The Spirit is waking us up to what it means to be a disciple. If I'm a disciple, I don't get to sit back and not do anything. I don't get to... I think I've decided people have what I call sort of a hospital image of parish. I've got problems, so I'm going to go to the parish and they're going to get healed and fixed. Well, folks, that's not the way it works. I'm a disciple. I go to the parish to provide some of that healing as well as receive it. So this is one of the benchmarks then. Proactive outreach to individuals and households within the parish despite the size and complexity of the parish structure. Inviting each and every household and parishioner into the life of the parish and its future formation. All kinds of models out there. Some parishes divide the parish into neighborhoods, geographical neighborhoods. And teams of parish counselors are expected to visit every house in that neighborhood in a given cycle, 1, 2, 3 year cycle. There are parishes where the pastor or the parish life coordinator makes an attempt to visit every household within a 3 year cycle. It's that personal contact. It's that reaching out to those little tail ends on that network graph. People are doing this. They're finding ways to do this. And it's important to understand it does not have to be the pastor or the staff then. We are so hungry for relationship. We are so longing for community. Okay? So how are we doing that? What you all told us was this. When you said your parishioners are active and engaged, these are the things that you said about it. They're engaged in the future visioning and growth of the parish. There are lay-led ministries, often with training and evaluation. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Many dioceses are cutting back their ministry formation programs. We've seen this over the past years. I think it is a profound sadness that that is happening. But what is happening in its place, and this is probably a very good thing, is parishes are picking up ministry training. So they are tending to training and formation within the parish of the people that are stepping forward to do ministry in the parish. Developing new ministries is going on all the time. And these are the parishes when the parishioner comes up and says, I wonder if, they don't get a no. They get a, well, that's interesting. Go get some more information about that and come back and we'll talk about it. And when you do that, you get new ministries. There's a parish down in New Orleans that after Katrina, they developed the ministries of sheetrocking and demolding. If you don't tend to the very basic fundamentals of life, you're not going to move in a spiritual direction. But who would have thought of that as a ministry? And yet, it's about developing the community, caring for one another, on and on. And integral parish council structures and planning processes. I cannot tell you the sadness of people where there's not an active council in their parish. And I don't think we fully understand what a council is. It is a consultative body. We all think that it's supposed to be decision-making and we feel bad. No, we do not understand the gift and the power of being consultative bodies. Canon law requires pastors to consult with the parishioners. It's right there. We have this in place. Interestingly, when people said to us, oh, they're not active engaged in our parish, they never mentioned these things. So these kind of go hand in hand. Now, what we are learning is that all of the typical ministries in the parish of word, worship, and service are moving into the hands of the laity, whether lay staff or the parishioners. So people are looking at all the ways that we can move to lay-led, whether it's prayer, through liturgy of the hours, or communion service instead of Mass every day. A lot of use of technology is going on out there. Folks, if you want to involve your youth and young adults, you better figure this one out. You better figure out how to move to Facebook. Does your parish have a I used to say, does your parish have a website? Now I say, does your parish have a Facebook page? Young adults all know what I'm talking about. And in fact, I did a Theology on Tap last week, and I said to the young adults, a parish is like a Facebook page. And they all looked at me and I said, well, yeah, it's a virtual community. Have you ever seen every member of your parish all at the same time? And they laughed because they knew exactly what I was talking about. Okay, we need to figure this out. A lot of distance-based learning. You can get a distance-based master's degree from the University of Dallas. There I did my plug. Okay. Scripture sharing, multicultural, multilingual community services. There's many, many ways that we can bring and involve the laity. Now, those same pastors that told us about their excellent parish, they told us that the development of the leadership and gifts of parishioners is rated by them as the least effective area of pastoral excellence. After everyone saying this is our future and this is what discipleship is and this is the way that we're going to keep going as parishes, what are we doing about it? And these are the areas that they told us. They put at the bottom of a list of 20-odd different parish activities. The building and renewal of adult faith and all its efforts. By the way, one of the benchmarks is intergenerational lifelong catechesis. Training of parishioners for leadership and ministry, developing small faith-sharing communities, and actively involving youth and young adults. Notice anything I've been talking about up there? We've got to figure this out, folks. This is our future. How are you doing this in your parish? Now, since I'm going to say a brief word here, and then this is the end of the part about discipleship, and I'm going to move into lay ecclesial ministry. But we did the study on the next generation of pastoral leaders. We interviewed online young adults in their 20s and 30s. We had over 1,000 responses. And Bishop Estabrook, who is the auxiliary bishop for the military diocese, wrote the preface to the book. And after he read the results of the study, his opening line of his preface is, and he quoted your own Tom Groom, he said, "We used to wonder if our children would have faith. But now we better wonder whether or not our faith will have children. Do you understand that we are hitting the first generation where it is not automatic that you become an active Catholic? We have to catechize and evangelize our children. There was one young person that stood up in one of the gatherings, and I quote this because I think he was on the money. He said, "You get 1 hour of our time a week. And if it's not the best game in town, you got a lot of competition." Now that's a whole different way of thinking about this. Do we make that 1 hour the best that we can make with the best preaching and the best music? Do you know that if you involve, are some studies, not mine, that show that if you use drums, you increase mass attendance? Okay. Well, we asked these same young adults, if you could tell church leaders anything you want, and believe me, it doesn't start when they're young adults. We have to start with the youth. We have to have solid youth programs in our parishes and our dioceses. What is the first thing that gets cut when money gets tight? Youth ministry. We can't do it. If we don't do that well, we are in serious trouble, folks. But this is what they said. Pay attention to us. Please pay attention to us. Now, quite frankly, when I was in my 20s, I probably said the same thing, but they're saying it. Now, we interviewed young adults who are already very active in either campus ministry or in their dioceses or parishes. Again, we went out and looked for the really involved ones. And so this may not be true across the board, but it's the involved ones that we at least need to be working with. Pay attention to us may mean getting them involved in the multiple parish ministries that you have. Do you have young adults in their 20s and 30s on your councils, on your boards, on your commissions, and so forth, leading your ministries? And then do you have young adult ministries that are specifically young adult? They want more catechesis, both relevant and rooted in the tradition. These answers broke pretty well 50-50. Of those using language that sounded more conservative, language that sounded more traditional about what they wanted, but the hunger for catechesis was across the board. And don't assume you know what they mean when they're talking about this stuff. There was one answer where the young woman said something to the effect, we have got to get back to tradition, we have gotten off track, we've got to get back to tradition, we've got to start teaching what we learned in Vatican II. Don't assume. When they ask for Eucharistic adoration, don't assume you know what it means. Don't assume it's what it was for you when you were growing up. They want an hour where they can turn off the BlackBerry. They want an hour of dedicated silence in the presence. But don't assume it's what you knew as you ask them. Learn from them, okay? They can see the future of the laity in the parish. And for God's sake, they said, stop scaring us. Please stop scaring us. Talk about love and forgiveness and acceptance. All right, we're going to talk about what we found is that the roles of parish staff are evolving. And while I'm going to focus on lay ecclesial ministry, you cannot talk about the parish and parish staff if you don't also talk about the pastor and about deacons. Okay, here's me in my attempt to find images again. What we discovered was that the pastor and the parish staff, their primary role is animators of the community. These excellent leaders that we met, they're catalysts of what goes on in the community. Now, these little cute little guys are neurons. And neurons are what we have in our brain, and they send out electrical impulses, and the electric impulse goes out to the edges and touches the next one, and it sparks that one, and it sends out electrical impulse. That whole idea of sending out impulses, of animating the community, that is a primary role for the pastor and staff. Not the doers, but the animators. Get the new ideas, get the pastoral imagination going. How do we excite the community? How do we involve people? All right. Now, this is one of the benchmarks. There's an evolving role of pastor in our parishes. People describe the pastor's role as that of a facilitator. Isn't that interesting? Overseeing the life and vision of the parish, calling forth gifts, and moving communities through change. Another word, a theological scriptural word, is overseer in the scriptural sense. of the life of the parish. Now, what we discovered was we listened. Sometimes we grouped people by parish role, so the pastors would be sitting together and chewing on a question, and the DREs would be together, and pastoral associates. And after one debrief, this pastoral associate sitting over here said, "Did they answer the same questions that we did?" The answer was yes, because pastors bring the gift of presidency. Now, I'm not saying other people don't have the gift. Don't hear me using either or language here. But these excellent pastors, they had a gift of presidency, the ability to preside not only over the sacramental life, but over the life of the community. And when pastors talked about the community, you heard them talking about the community as a whole. There was one that was talking, he had a new parish he was moving into, and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do first, this is what I'm going to do second, this is what the community is going to need here, I'm going to find out about that there. And he was connected to the life of the community as a whole, and saw where it needed to move, and what it needed to do to get there. Knew what steps this particular community was going to have to open up to a large rural Hispanic population. And he knew exactly how he was going to, first we're going to have a town meeting, then we're going to have a lunch, and he had all these ideas of how that was going to happen. That's the gift of presidency. And you need that to oversee the life of the community, right? Now, deacons, deacons are members of parish staff, and I'm not going to talk a lot about deacons because, again, our focus isn't here. However, there's a very large and growing number of deacons in this country. I'm not sure, I still haven't got a really good answer of why the bishops have gotten so excited and are doing these diaconate programs all over the country. I did figure one out. I was at a mass where the presider was from an Asian country, and he said something, and then the deacon interpreted it. Well, right, that's a use. Basically, what we found is there's absolutely no consensus on the role of the deacon in the parish. There's marvelous documents. I mean, the documents are there. It's not at that level. We don't know how to put it into practice. And so some deacons do one thing, one parish, something quite different in another parish. We have not, and I think to our detriment. We need to figure out the role of the deacon and not confuse it with other roles. By and large, deacons are appointed to a parish. They're not full-time. They're not paid. They have other ministries outside of the parish if their true character as a deacon is being taken into consideration. My own take on it is, if we talk about the deacon being the voice of being the presence of the church with the poor and the voice of the poor in the church, every time you see the deacon in your parish, you should be thinking about the poor. It should be that connected, because that is the gift of service that the deacon brings. But interestingly, what they are giving us is an experience of married clergy. We are experimenting in what it would look like to have a married clergy in this country, in case we ever move in that direction. Now, lay parish leadership. This doesn't get any less complicated because there's so many ways to move into parish leadership. You can be employed, okay? You can be employed as a lay ecclesial minister or as a lay minister, with or without a resident pastor. Now, the difference here, the bishops have put a fairly narrow definition on who a lay ecclesial minister is. And that is a person in a recognized public position in the parish that's primarily pastoral or catechetical. So a DRE, a youth minister, a music minister, those would be ecclesial ministers. But you have a lot of professionals working in parishes who see what they're doing as ministry. They don't fall into the bishop's categories. So business administrator might be one. A lot of folks in parishes who are lay ministers but don't have the title lay ecclesial ministers. You have installed parish life coordinators. Are there any in this diocese, pastoral administrators? I don't think there are. There's some 500 in the country. The bishops are kind of nervous about this role. This is when you have a vacant parish. This is a parish that does not have a pastor. It's vacant. And under Canon 517.2, which was added to the canon by the bishops from Latin and South America, the bishop may choose to install a deacon, religious or layperson, to provide the pastoral and administrative care of the parish. What the canon is concerned about only is that there is someone who could be a pastor, whether or not actually in the moment functioning as a pastor, to provide supervision. What's different between this and a person that's been employed by the pastor, you have many, we've got over 3,400 parishes without a pastor right now. But where the situation is that those parishes have been clustered under one pastor and then a pastoral associate is hired and functions to all intents and purposes as the primary presence there, they're connected to and their direct responsibility is to the pastor. Parish life coordinator is installed by the bishop and their direct report is the bishop. This is important for the life of the parish because we have to maintain that connection of the parish with the ordinary. And we lose it if we don't ensure that direct connection. So this is critically important. We interviewed over 50 bishops across the country in focus groups on this question. I'll give you the short version of their response. The short version of the response was, I'm not so sure about this. It is an anomaly, and it is. We would prefer pastors. There's no doubt about that. It's an anomaly, and it's going to be temporary. Only about 75 or 100 years will we be using this. Notice church speak there. And those guys out there better be really careful about, but my parish life coordinators are great. Let me tell you about them. Recognize that dynamic? The face you know? Okay. So that's the reality. And then lots of parish staff, and I think maybe you even indicated that, where it's not an employed person, but it's parishioners who are volunteering and providing that ministry in the parish. There's a lot of that. They may be given titles. There are HR implications for all of this, which we as a church, even as we're beginning to look at what it's like to have a married clergy, we're also looking at what it's like to have an employed set of ministers. And all the HR stuff is involved. So in many states, you cannot hire somebody half-time, but require them to work full-time, and the second half is their volunteer service as a parishioner. You can't do that. So there's lots of implications in here, with or without pastor or staff, and I gave you an example of that. Now, in this country, there's 31,000 lay ecclesial ministers. My favorite definition of this role comes from our own Dr. Hanberg here. A vocational commitment to formal public ministry in the church with official recognition. Now, the person that has become a lay ecclesial minister has repositioned themselves to the church. They have taken a public role. They have accepted the responsibility that comes with accepting that role, which may or may not involve a paycheck. They now are related differently to the parish. The word vocation here is critically important, and that's why the work that Dr. Hannenberg and others are doing is so important for us. This is a vocation. Lay ministers see this, the vast majority of them, as a vocational call. Now, what does that mean? Remember, if we stay in that mechanistic, dualistic, static set of definitions and think of vocation as only a state in life, we get in trouble here. And then you have women religious coming up to me and say, I'm not a lay ecclesial minister. Well, the way the definition is being used by the bishop is it doesn't have anything to do with state in life. It's a role in the parish. Either you're in the parish as an ordained or you're not. You're in the parish as in the not category that we were talking about last night that we don't have better words for yet. So lay ecclesial ministers do involve religious in those very specific recognized public roles in the parish. Now, it's really important to see the importance of vocation here as part of the call to lay ministry. There was a parish where the pastor recently sent out a memo to all of the parishioners, to all the staff, and said, you need to understand my pastoral vision. The pastor and the religious have committed their lives to the church. The rest of you are only temporary. You're employed. Did not go down well. I don't think the DRE is there anymore. No, we are looking at lay ecclesial ministers who are moving into retirement who have never, ever had another employer except the church. Their entire professional lives have been in service to the church. So the old saw doesn't work anymore, and that's why we've got to move away from state and life definitions of vocation. People see this as a call, and it's an ecclesial call. So I actually do believe that there's a vocation to medicine or a vocation to the law or other things. The lay ecclesial ministers have an ecclesial call. They have ecclesial to service within the structure of the church. They bring the gift of collaboration. Now, that's not to say they don't bring other gifts, but we didn't need to deal with collaboration so much before. And I'm using collaboration here in the sense of calling forth the gifts of everyone in service of a shared vision and mission. Collaboration here does not mean we all work together and we all get to do everybody else's work, and I get to tell you how to do yours and you get to tell. That's not the kind of collaboration I'm talking about. And certainly one of probably the most significant question we were asked out there is, how do men and women work together? How do we collaborate? How do lay and ordained collaborate? How do ordained supervise professional, educated staff that are years older than them? Those are collaboration questions that need answers. And one of the things I tell folks is, go buy a copy of Deborah Tannen's From 9 to 5 Men and Women in the Workplace. From 9 to 5 Men and Women in the Workplace by Deborah Tannen. Excellent book. And here's one of the short versions. This is not directly from her book, but she addresses it. It's the difference between, I've got to get this right, being grilled or being marinated. Now, you all like a good barbecue, right? Do you grill it first and then marinate it, or do you marinate it first and then grill it? Depends on what you're cooking, right? When you're working with men, I am told, you grill first and then marinate it, because what's up front on the table is what gets heard. And I watched a man that I worked with do this, and I sit there and I just shudder. Obviously, I'm not a man, okay? So I just shudder. And he would pick up the phone, and he wouldn't say hello. He whatever the issue was. And then he would kick back, he'd put his feet up on the desk, and he'd just have this jolly old conversation about the weather or the football or whatever. And I'm going, what? With women, you marinate first, and then you grill. Join, connect. How's the weather? How's your family? Are you feeling better today? How's work going? Oh, by the way, I think we need to work with this issue. Marinate first, then grill. Okay, gender differences, that's a big part of it. But the kind of collaboration we're talking here is calling forth gifts. And we're about finished here. The benchmark is that these folks are generalists, responsible for much of the day-to-day work in the parish. I'm running out of time, so I want to, we're done well. There's collaborative team atmosphere and strong leadership roles. Theological grounding. You need to have the theology to do this ministry. You need to have the graduate level, if at all possible, theology to do this ministry.